Okay, so thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And it's really lovely to see there's such an interest in this sort of part of postgraduate education that doesn't always get a lot of attention. So thank you very much for joining us. I just quickly just going to introduce myself and co-authors of the report. So I'm Jennie Eldridge. I work with University Alliance, Director of Postgraduate Provision for them, and oversee and run our collaborative Doctoral Training Alliance programs for members. Carolyn Wynne is with us here from Coventry. She's Director of the Doctoral and Researcher College, but also Trustee and Honorary Secretary of UKCGE. And my colleague, Dr. Rabia Arshad, who is our Postgraduate Researcher Development Manager at University Alliance. So thank you both for joining us, and thank you for all of the work for this project. So over this next hour, Carolyn and I will run through a few slides which will outline the rationale for the study, explain the methodology, and share some of our key findings and trends that have emerged from the research. But just to note, we're not going to focus on everything. The report is a lot more detailed, so we would really encourage you to read through the report, and it will be shared within the link for it will be shared within the chat towards the end of here. And hopefully there'll be time at the end for questions and any reflections. So thank you to colleagues who contributed and took the time to respond to the survey, providing us with this information and being able to develop our study, and to all of those that help contribute to the report in one form or another. You're acknowledged within the report, both. Thank you very much for that. So it's been 10 years since the last detailed study on professional doctorates was published by the Careers Research and Advisory Centre. And during the intervening years, there's been some conflicting views on what is happening with these programmes through a range of different reports by other organisations. So UKCGE felt, in partnership with University Alliance, felt that it was time to have a look and examine the current position of these programmes, and this time to look at it across UK and Ireland. So our report explores current patterns of provision, institutional motivations for offering these programmes, and their contribution to the wider policy agendas. So as part of the report, we undertook a survey of research degree awarding institutions within UK and Ireland. A total of 160 institutions were invited to participate. 73 responded, which gave us a 46% response rate. And alongside that data, we also did some desk-based research, which included reviewing institutional websites, looking at other published reports and other publicly available information around the professional doctorates and doctorate provision as a whole. The survey question was divided into 3 sections. So we asked questions around research professional doctorates, those around taught professional doctorates, and then also around institutional strategies and motivations. I'm just going to focus on a few of the responses around the research professional doctorates questions that were asked. Carolyn is going to look at some of the taught professional ones, and before we both then move on to look at some of what the detail of what the results are telling us. So the majority of our respondents I noted that they did offer research professional doctorates. And when you break these down by their sort of university groupings, the majority of those did seem to come from the post-92 universities within the UK. And this sort of, especially within the UK, this aligned with the desk-based research that we did, where we found that 73% of institutions offered professional doctorates in one form or another. But the Irish, just to note that the Irish universities offered, it was around 41%. But just to note here that the desk-based research didn't aggregate it between professional and taught, because it wasn't always clear where those programs sat. So we just want to highlight that. This slide now is looking at sort of some of the institutional strategies in terms of the program developed for the research professional doctorates. And the respondents that said that they didn't offer any of the programs were asked whether they intended to develop any over the next 5 years and what their rationale might be. As you can see, the majority of the respondents here were not planning to develop any new research professional doctorates. And some of the reasons behind that was that it wasn't part of their institutional strategy. There were capacity constraints within their institution, as well as capacity restraints around supervisory support. And the respondents that did offer research to professional doctorates were asked whether the number of programs over the last 5 years had actually increased, decreased, or stayed the same. You'll see from this chart that the minority of them reported a decrease in the number of programs, where the biggest increase over the last 5 years had come from within the post-92 institutions. But the other side we wanted to sort of highlight here is that actually within the Irish universities, both Irish and the Irish technological universities, they reported no decrease within the last 5 years. They continue to offer them. We also asked questions around enrolment in the same intervening period, and this provided a bit of a mix across the institutional type. You can see, particularly amongst post-92 universities, that there is a real mix between institutions increasing, decreasing, and those that are staying the same. It seemed to be sort of more or less the same across those ones, whereas there was obviously divergence with the other university types. And these respondents were asked later in the survey what the proportion of research professional doctorate candidates were against their total PGR community. Of the respondents to that question, which were 42, 40% of them reported that they constituted more than 20% of the PGR population. And again, these were typically within the post-92 institutions. The survey then went on to explore the longevity and the future of the professional doctorate, and the respondents were asked if institutions were considering on closing any of their research professional doctorates in the coming years. Only 20% of the respondents indicated that they were looking to close them, and there was a variety of reasons behind that. The main reason, though, for closing programs appeared to be insufficient interest from applicants, both home and UK, but also other areas highlighted the lack of funding opportunities available. Supervisory capacity once again came up, and the inability really, or the sort of the desire not to compete with other institutions that had a strong reputation and market share of the professional doctorates already. These same respondents were also asked about whether they were planning on replacing any of their programs with other types of doctoral programs. Two that said yes, they definitely were. The reasons behind that was that one of them were looking to replace one program with another professional doctorate that was part of a broader collaborative partnership. And the other respondents was looking to replace one with a distance learning structured PhD. So another type of doctorate rather than the professional doctorate as such. So the final area around the research professional doctors just wanted to highlight with this stage was around the demographics of the community as a whole. And respondents reported that the primary market for their professional doctorates was home students at 61%. And the majority of those were to undertake the degrees on a part-time level. But the figures highlighted here are really around the representation of underrepresented groups. And they highlight that a third of respondents indicated that it would improve diversity, particularly in relation to age and ethnicity. And this came from within the UK post-92 and the Irish technological universities. Handing over to Carolyn now.
Thank you. So before we do move on to sharing the results that related to questions about taught professional doctorates, it's probably relevant at this point to share some of the reported institutional strategies that our respondents told us about. that drove professional doctorates, both research and taught, from an institutional perspective. So as you can see from the slides on the screen now, provision was largely driven and influenced by these 4 factors. So predominantly increasing PGR numbers and increasing PGR income. So they were probably the most significant and weighted drivers that our respondents told us about. So before we move on to the responses and results for taught, respondents were also invited to provide us on detail of taught professional doctorates. And the number of respondents that did offer taught doctoral programmes was significantly lower to those that told us they offered research programmes. So this was only 13 responses, so that equated to 18% of our total respondents, with a further 3 indicating that they had offered taught professional doctorate programmes previously. So I do just want to caveat that the numbers in this section of the report are significantly lower, and so therefore some of the findings that we have made, particularly when we refer to the percentage points, are based on these lower numbers. So just to caveat some of the percentages and numbers that we are going to report to you. So those that didn't currently offer taught professional doctorates were asked if they were intending to develop such programmes over the next 5 years. And as we found out, the majority of institutions were not intending to. However, 20% indicated that they were considering developing programmes. The reasoning behind this focused on improved recruitment at taught level, while also addressing specific needs that particular professions had come to them from a strategic point of view. It was as deemed as being important, while also enhancing engagement with other sectors. So one respondent described this as being to creatively and responsibly support evolution of doctoral programmes, which is quite a poignant reminder of why we all offer doctoral education within our institutions. One of the institutions of the institutions that considered developing taught programmes, 2 were pre-92 and 7 were post-92, and 2 were Irish technological universities. Okay, so moving on to the main body of the results for taught professional doctorates. So from the 13 respondents that indicated that they offered taught programmes, we asked them a similar set of questions to those that we had asked at research professional doctorate level. And these were a set of questions that related to any changes in the number of programmes that were on offer and around the changes in the number of enrolment. So you can see on the next pictures here that there is a similar trend to what was reported for research programmes. We then followed up on this and asked if taught programmes were meeting recruitment targets as intended when the programmes were designed. And as you can see, only 5 indicated that they were, again, following a similar pattern to research professional doctorate enrolments, where programmes had been developed to increase numbers, yet in the majority of responses that the level of recruitment had not been realised. We've popped a quote here from one of our respondents that, again, similar to what we were hearing from responses about research professional doctorates, that it was not a particular priority for the institution amidst a number of other challenges that were taking place within their institution at that time. And I think that's probably something that resonates with many of us at the moment. So moving on to the next slide, then we then asked respondents if their institution were planning on closing any taught professional doctorate programmes and what the rationale for this was. So as you can see here, the numbers are significantly fewer than research professional doctorates. So 4 indicated that they were, and as you can see from the slide presented, respondents provided a very similar view on the rationale for closing taught doctoral programmes as they had for research, that were aligned to funder preferences both in the UK and internationally, and a set of reasoning that indicated a lack of interest from applicants or from university leaders to be able to develop them. Respondents also identified some of the main challenges in developing and recruiting to professional doctorates. So this was both research and taught. And as you can see from the table and information in front of us, that the results are quite stark and sobering, that relate to the perception of the prof doc having parity or being seen as less than the PhD, in addition to a sense of a lack of willingness from funders and an overall sense of a lack of value from multiple stakeholders, whether that be from students themselves, from business and industry, or from wider university leadership. It's perhaps no surprise, therefore, that some respondents told us that they were looking to develop alternative doctoral programmes to address some of these challenges and in order to remain competitive. And this is what we got here from some of the free text comments here, particularly around it already being a saturated market and trying to compete in what was felt as being an already oversaturated marketplace within UK and Irish institutions. So what we then went on to explore here was around the different doctoral programmes that institutions considered to be targeted at and attractive to professionals. So what we see here is a very significant movement and shift towards practice-based PhDs, PhD by prior published work, PhD by publication, the structured PhD, and then there's a minority of those that said other. So, for example, a couple of respondents talked about their collaborations with business and industry around having a PhD at work. So similar to the European model of being able to be employed by an organisation undertaking doctoral research, that was something that also came through in the responses from those that completed the survey. So what do these results tell us? And we will try and be as brief but as concise as we possibly can be to make sure that there is enough time for questions at the end. So the main thing to consider here is around the position, purpose and place of the doctorates, and the results do illustrate a landscape of professional doctorates that is both evolving but also quite uneven. You can see that we've described it here as a bit of messiness around what the landscape looks like, and largely one that has been shaped by shifting institutional priorities, as well as funder priorities, as well as broader sector drivers and trends nationally and internationally, in addition to changing perceptions of the value of the doctorate across the sector more broadly. So the survey results show us that it's evident that both UK and Irish HEIs predominantly consider the professional doctorate to be a research degree rather than a taught degree. Some respondents highlighted a sense of persistence around academic snobbery, that the professional doctorate programme was less than the PhD, despite there being research intensity and a professional relevance. It's clear from what our respondents were telling us that the prof doc is still not universally regarded as being equal or equivalent in both status and standing. So it appears that this tension that respondents were telling us about plays a significant role in influencing how institutions are choosing to design, resource and promote these programmes, as well as how candidates, funders and employers are perceiving their value. So we have this mixed picture of the success of the prof doc across the UK and an Irish higher education sector. Where there has been growth, it has been concentrated within those institutions where there is an established portfolio and there's the infrastructure to continue to support its delivery and recruitment. But the flip side is that the success has not been universal, particularly amongst post-92 institutions who don't have established portfolios and who describe to us declining and static enrolments. So as Jennie highlighted earlier, we have started to see some institutions closing their programmes or considering doing so, citing market saturation. So ultimately, this divergence does underscore the unevenness of the markets at the moment, and the extent to which institutional identity and mission can shape the sustainability of professional doctorates for the future. What we also then see is that is a plateau of growth in the professional doctorates programme portfolio. So the kind of starting point that we had for this was looking at the CRAC report from 2016, authored by Robin Mellors-Vaughan. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And so this study specifically looked at English institutions. We don't have the data for what happened in the other UK nations or in Ireland, unfortunately. But what we are able to glean from looking at the desk-based research and from what that the CRAC report said is that the number of institutions in England that are offering prof docs has declined in that time. So that, against what the rest of the data from the survey was looking at, leads us to this conclusion that there has been this plateau of growth. What the survey also then talks about is what we do about the future of funding. And as we showed you in some of the earlier slides, it has emerged as a central factor influencing both the provision and participation in prof docs. So those perceived disparities between funding opportunities for PhDs compared to the prof doc should be a cause for concern for governments both across the UK and Ireland. I think particularly given that both governments have ambitions to grow research and innovation, professional doctorates do offer a critical pathway to the development of highly skilled and a research-informed workforce, particularly as there has been a real lack of clarity from governments in both the UK and Ireland around how funding can be leveraged not only for the professional doctorate but also for alternate doctoral pathways. So I think a specific example of this can be noted in both countries' reviews of doctoral education over the last five to 6 years, where almost exclusively those reviews of doctoral education refer to PhDs rather than to any other doctoral or research programme. And to date, there has been a significant and persistent lack of investment in the UK and Ireland in supporting mid to senior career professionals who have the opportunity to take part in doctoral education, particularly part-time doctorates. So that is an area of concern. And so it is therefore difficult to see how these ambitious research and development goals can be achieved without a more flexible model and access to funding. One of the interesting findings has been the development of some institutions of alternate doctoral pathways, specifically to attract professional learners, such as the structured PhD and thesis by alternate format. So moving on then to kind of think about and talk about professional doctorates. So is it professional doctorates or doctorates for professionals, and does it specifically matter? So as I said, some of these institutions that completed the survey indicated that nomenclature of their doctoral programmes matters, while for others this is less so. And what we observed is the broadening of doctoral programmes to attract professionals that bring an ability to provide choice across our institutions, as well as providing focus and priority. So we looked at a couple of slides ago that the different types of programmes that institutions are looking to develop. What we did note was an increase in the popularity of the structured PhD from UK participants, specifically being a programme that is aimed at professionals, while also being a programme to replace professional doctorates. So what was quite interesting is one of our respondents actually told us that they were changing their prof docs into structured PhDs. They were pretty much the same as a prof doc in terms of their structure, but a PhD sold better. So that's quite insightful. So this increase does follow a steady growth of such programmes that have taken place in Ireland since the mid-2000s, where it has acted as a programme to solidify Ireland's policy and strategy around sustainability and commitment to the structured approach to doctoral education. And what we saw as part of our desk-based research is that the structured PhD is very much now an established programme that is offered in Irish institutions. And so this gaining of popularity and traction in the UK does kind of follow what our Irish colleagues have been doing for a number of years. But it is one of several pathways that can provide a route to doctoral study, and one that is complementary to, not in competition with, opportunities for professionals.
So looking at the institutional approach strategy and view of the professional doctorates as part of the study, the results have shown that institutional strategy plays a huge role within the shaping of the trajectory of the professional doctorates. But while it's not been possible to draw definitive conclusions, we can see, as Carolyn has talked about, this divergence in the landscape developing, and that for post-92 universities and Irish technological universities in particular, the professional doctorates continue to support widening participation and diversification of the doctoral community, which aligns with their very much broader educational missions. And also, as highlighted through Carolyn, is the strategic pressure in pivoting away from the professional doctorates, either back towards the more traditional PhD route, which is perceived, as we've talked about, more fundable, more competitive, and more aligned with certain institutional aspirations, or looking at developing those alternative doctorates for professionals. So there's a lot that plays around with that, and it's how the institutions position themselves will really very much impact on where it goes next with the professional doctorates. And so this is it. So where next for the professional doctorates? Future trends. So despite all the challenges that we've touched on and that report sort of highlights in a lot more details, it is very clear that professional doctorates still have a place and a purpose. And we feel that rather than an actual decline, that we're moving into this recalibration, into a phase of selective and strategic growth that's shaped by the institutional strengths, the market positioning, and the evolution of what doctoral education should achieve. But the future of a professional doctorate is also very dependent on the UK and the Irish government policies and strategies, and also the commitment to lifelong learning, where the incorporation of diverse forms of doctoral education to achieve economic growth is key, along with to maintain commitment to it. As noted already, funding is critical, and major funders both in the UK and Ireland do play a significant role in supporting and enhancing alternative doctoral pathways. It should not be restricted to one type of doctorate, the PhD as such, over any others, but across a breadth of the doctoral programmes that are equally worthy of access to funding. So we feel that there's more that can be done in this area and more work that can be looked into and research. And we took the opportunity as part of this study in the report to propose further areas of work that could highlight the value and strengthen the value of the professional doctorate as a vital qualification. The report identifies areas such as a more detailed data analysis of the exact proportion of professional doctorate candidates within the sector PGR community, what the enrolment trends by disciplines look like, a further explanation into the value and the provision of taught professional doctorates, the wider implication societal value of the programs, and how the different models of professional doctorate programs generate impact for the individuals, organisations, professions and communities. I want to just leave you with this one final thought, with a strong message that came throughout the study, is that professional doctors should not be seen as a lesser pathway to a traditional PhD or other doctorates, but one that is well suited to the professional development in 2026 and beyond.